Hey everyone! Today I want to discuss a bit about my favorite books from 2021 and things I read in 2021 that I really enjoyed, so let's dig right in. The first book I want to discuss is this, and it's Barack Obama's Promised Land, and it's actually a book that I'm rereading right now, which is quite rare for myself. And the thing why I'm rereading this rather is because Obama is a really interesting character in that he has this sort of everyday man vibe, and he curses, he smokes, he isn't the sort of refined gentleman that you'd think be the president of the United States at its core. Of course, he's sophisticated and has a law degree and all of the things like that. But it's really his sort of everyday demeanor contrasted with the sort of very deep and vast understanding of the world of US politics, of Middle Eastern politics and things like that. That really make this a standout book. So this might be my favorite book from 2021 right off the bat, and it's why I'm rereading this again starting this year. The second book I want to discuss is Bill Gates' How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And this is a great book because it sort of it recognizes the complexity of climate change, and while it does that, it also sort of gives a feeling of hope by telling you the sort of areas to which climate change is divided, and it also gives a very realistic understanding of how climate change and reducing CO2 emissions might be gone about. So he talks a lot about reducing carbon emissions, and he also talks about capturing carbon, and essentially both of those things have to work together to make the world carbon neutral, because some things we can't get rid of that pollute the world, and that's why we need to also take emissions out of the earth to make us climate neutral, if that makes sense. So this is a really fascinating book that gives you a lot of insight and most importantly a lot of context to today's climate discussion, and that's why I found this book really valuable. And it's also quite short, and it's a really easy read. The font is laughably big, and it's a fun book and a quick book to read to gain an understanding of the climate situation right now. The third book that I'm reading, and the first book in Finnish that I'm reading this year, and this is actually one that I'm still actively reading, as you can see, and this is Peter Frankopan's Silk Roads. And what this book really does is, because all of us in the Western world have been taught sort of Western-centric history, and of course it makes sense, since we are here, we think of ourselves as the central location of the world. But it's really recent that, for example, Europe has been a central region in the world. And what this book does, it really changes the perspective from the sort of Western culture to actually how much of an impact Middle Eastern culture and progress really made in the West as well, and how Western success is really only stolen from the Middle East and the East in general. And it's also really interesting because there's a lot of parallel between the sort of 1000s and the sort of first millennia of the world, so from 0 to 1000 years, which give a lot of context to the things that are happening right now, and gives a lot of really interesting ways to frame things and think about things like religion, like the rise of China and things like that. So this is a really fascinating read as well. The fourth book that I read is called Capital in the 21st Century, and it's by a French economist by the name of Thomas Piketty. And what this book does, it's intended as a modern version of Marx's book by the same name. And what this book really does, essentially it's a lighter version of what Marx wrote in his version of Capital, and where essentially capital would the growth of capital would become the demise of the modern economy, and people would the economy would collapse under its own weight if the bourgeois got enough wealth. So Piketty doesn't take things that far. He's sort of more reasonable, and he also really despises Marx's data collection techniques. This book is really based on data, and he's dug through so much of economic data, which makes this book fascinating. So even if you don't agree with his notion, which is essentially that we should have a global tax on the capital and tax all the wealthy people, because the inequality in the world is rising at a rapid rate and will have a more unequal state in the entire world in the future. Even if you don't agree with that notion, this book is worth reading, because it again gives you a lot of context and ways to think about the world, and it also gives you a lot of cool factoids that you can throw in at parties to show that you're the biggest nerd. So these were all my sort of non-fiction highlights. Of course, I have a lot more of those on my bookshelf, but I want to just give a couple of fantasy suggestions as well, and well, essentially one fantasy suggestion, and that is, excuse me, this is the first book. So Patrick Rothfuss's The Kingkiller Chronicle, the first book of which is The Name of the Wind, which is just a beautiful title for a book. So this is a fantasy series that I really enjoyed, and I found the storytelling really fascinating. I found a lot of really cool words, and the writing is just gorgeous. It's just drop dead gorgeous. So I love this book series. Unfortunately, this is a trilogy, and Patrick Rothfuss did sort of what J.R.R. Martin did. So he's taken about 10 years to write the third edition of the book, if I remember correctly, and the third edition isn't yet out. So the story isn't yet finished, and I don't know if it will be finished. But these two books, The Name of the Wind, which is the first one, and The Wise Man's Fear, which is the second one, these both are very good reads, and I devoured these in a very short period of time for how thick they are. So these are some of my favorite book picks for 2021. Let me know if you want me to go in depth on any of these books, and if you want me to give out more opinions and reviews on each of these books. All of them I would recommend, all of them I'm gonna reread at some point. And yeah, so thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.